A recent study shows that employee productivity is down 20%, especially for remote workers, due to too many and inefficient meetings. I'll explain how to improve meeting management and thus employee productivity in this video. Hello, I'm Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. I read two conflicting studies, one that said employee performance was good for remote workers, but a more recent one saying that productivity is down 20% for remote workers. And the main reason for the decrease in productivity of 20% was due to too many meetings and ineffective meetings. Now, this is something that I've talked about in the past about improving or running meetings and making them more productive. And it seems that it's gotten worse during the pandemic. And one reason may be because managers feel they need to be on top of things, so they're calling more meetings. Now, the previous study said that CEOs and managers were happy with the performance of people working from home, but this new study suggests that people are just putting in longer hours to meet performance expectations, meaning that productivity is down and people are just working longer to get the job done, which isn't really good for productivity as a whole. And they measure that by hours or productivity for hours worked. So it's productivity per hour. And there was a lot of time spent in meetings where employees are taken away from focused work for getting things done that they actually need to do, that they're actually being paid for. Now, one of the things in this article that I read, it was from The Economist, it talks about Bartleby's Law, which I'd never heard of, so this is new to me. And it states, the law states that 80% of the time of 80% of the people in meetings is wasted. Wow. So not only are managers now calling too many meetings to stay on top of things, but they're wasting people's times. So a long time ago, and I'll make this available, I came out with a meeting planner, or meeting agenda, and I'll go through the steps of using that tool, and you could download that for free from the documents part of my website. There's a link in the video to access that, and you just sign up for it. There's also another site where I make these tools available called Elikins, and the link for that is in the description of the video. Now, the first thing is to know what the goal or purpose of your meeting is, because you want to be able to achieve that in the meeting. You're having a meeting for a reason. Often, managers call meeting and the purpose isn't clear. The outcome that you want to achieve for that meeting isn't clear. So that's the first step, I would say. And then you, based on the goal or purpose of the meeting, you want to define the participants. In other words, who should be at the meeting, and only include people that really need to be there. Sometimes we have people there that we want to keep informed of or up to date on things, but they don't really all necessarily need to be at the meeting. They could be informed after the meeting of what is expected of them as a result of that, or what was the decision made at the meeting. So you want to put obviously the date, you want to have the time the meeting starts and the time it's expected to end. This way you want to accomplish everything within that time frame. Then you want to include the material required that you need. Maybe it's a flip chart, a whiteboard, and once you populate the start time in my spreadsheet, it populates on each line, or the first line will be that starting time. and then you add item by item, and you could put a time for each item, and that adds the time to the next line. So that's really very simply the agenda. You could also add who is going to discuss that particular line item, how will they do it, if they require specific material, and so on and so forth. And so that's really planning your agenda. So another thing that you could do to make the meeting more efficient is to assign roles to people to help you keep the meeting better organized. So if you're the manager, you may be also the chairperson of the meeting, but you don't need to be. You can assign a chairperson or facilitator if you want. Sometimes there's skilled people that you could ask to facilitate that meeting. You want to have for sure a note taker, somebody that will keep notes of what decisions were made, what actions need to be taken, and by who, so that can be put in writing and communicated. You want to have a timer. If the chairperson is not doing that, it may be easier to have a separate time person to remind the facilitator or chairperson of how time is advancing. You may also want to have a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper is somebody that helps the chairperson or facilitator apply the guidelines or rules for behavior of everybody in the meeting. Now, to do that, you need to establish your guidelines ahead of time, and you may already have that for running meetings in your organization. If not, you want to establish some simple guidelines like, everybody should be listening, not interrupting the person speaking, maybe a guideline on coming to consensus, one for participation to get everybody to participate, things like that. I could make a separate video just on establishing guidelines, and maybe I'll do that in the future. So once you have your roles assigned, you just run the meeting and keep it on track, keep it on time, end it on time. I like to use an evaluation, simple evaluation with the participants to determine if the meeting was successful and everybody was satisfied. And the first thing is, was the goal of the meeting achieved? So you want to get a thumbs up on that. Did the meeting start and end on time? And you want to get a thumbs up. One frustrating things for people is, those that arrive on time is waiting to start the meeting for those that haven't arrived. And if that's a problem in your organization, you want to address that. You want to get the meeting started on time and ending on time. And then you want to ask the question, were the participants satisfied with the outcome of the meeting, or how it was run, how it was managed? So those are the simple criteria that you could use to determine if your meeting was successful and met the needs of your participants, or are they satisfied? And of course, you want to make sure that the action steps are written down, and that who is responsible for each action step and by when is noted and communicated to those people. The last thing I always recommend is, before you end the meeting, you determine a follow-up date. And usually a meeting where there's action steps requires a follow-up meeting to come together and review if the steps were taken and if things were put in place that needed to be to address whatever situation you were having the meeting about, whether it be a problem-solving meeting, a planning meeting, whatever it is. There's usually a follow-up, or if it's not a meeting to follow up, who's going to take responsibility to follow up and report back to everybody. So there needs to be some firm action put down in writing. So if you follow my steps, you will have a more successful meeting for sure, and people will be more agreeable to attend meetings, and they won't be grumbling about having too many meetings and too many inefficient meetings. So go ahead and download that template from the link in the description of this video. I'll put a link to also another video on this topic that I've done in the past, and maybe another video related to this one. Check out the articles on my blog section of my website for the articles that go along with each of these videos. You'll get a different perspective. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and click on the bell for notifications of new videos. Please leave a comment. Let me know if this is helpful for you, and if you have any subjects that you'd like me to cover in the future. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.